Good evening, our listeners and our viewers, and thank you for joining us for week 16 of our Can You Fix Nigeria Challenge. With me tonight, I have Mr. Elliot Umole, who's been our panelist on a few of these events already. Elliot, you're welcome to tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Kunle.
All right. Yes, so tonight we're talking about civil service reforms in Nigeria, and we're talking about the so-called Oronsaye Report. But earlier, before we get into the main discussion, for the benefit of our listeners, I wanted to give a quick synopsis, of that report so that it's easier for people to follow the discussions when we start the discussion, at least for the benefit of our listeners. So recall that this report itself was, was initiated by President Goodluck Jonathan in 2011. And at that time, he had set up a 7-man committee, to look into how we run our civil service. Mr. Stephen Oronsaye was picked to head that committee, and appropriately so, because obviously he was our #1 civil servant at the time as head of service of the Federation of Nigeria. The committee was a 7-man committee, and that committee, the responsibility of that committee was to look into restructuring, rationalization, and harmonization of several of our commissions, ministries, and departmental offices. So that committee looked into the office of the Vice President, the office of the Secretary of the federal government. They looked into the office of the HOS, the head of service himself. They looked into 26 ministries and many parastatals and departments, including National Sports Commission, NIMASA, Nigerian Ports, amongst others. Okay, now overall, that committee came back to President Goodluck Jonathan with a 850-page report. And that report had at least 250 major recommendations. So key recommendations are some of the examples. Let me just give an example of some of the recommendations. And I think this is important so that when we start our discussion, our listeners will be able to follow us. So one recommendation as an example, just as an example, was that they recommended that we have ICPC, we have EFCC, we have Code of Conduct Bureau. Why don't we merge that into one organization? Do you understand? Now, put that at the back of your mind that at that time, we are spending about 85% of our national revenues of our budget as recurrent expenditure. So you can see where they are coming with some of these recommendations. Another recommendation they looked at was that, okay, they said, you have NECO, you have WAEC, merge them into one. Yeah, you have NEMA, which is our National Emergency Management Authority. Then you have another one called Nigerian Refugee Council, merge them into one. You have the National Salaries and Wages Commission. You have the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Commission, merge them into one. You have a Nigerian Atomic Energy Commission. Why don't you put that into the Ministry of Power? You have our Debt Management Office. The Debt Management Office of Nigeria is sitting under the office of the Vice President. Why don't you move that into the Ministry of Finance? They gave the examples that, okay, other typical examples is that Nigeria needs to stop sponsoring people, Christians or Muslims going for pilgrimage. Why should the government of Nigeria be sponsoring people going for pilgrimage? Do you understand? Government should simply task themselves with providing visas for those people and giving them the necessary vaccines and inoculations before they go for their pilgrimage. The other thing they talked about, which struck me, was that they talked about universities. I mean, we can generate a lot of money in our universities by universities renting out their accommodation, They are saying that university students should also pay. Do you understand? But education should be free up to secondary school level. Like I mentioned, it's worth going to look at that report, but our listeners can avail themselves. That report is available on the internet. At least 250 major recommendations. After they finished their work, government set up a second committee to develop a white paper. There was a white paper committee. That committee was led by Attorney General at the time, Mohammed Adoke. And he had a lot of other heads, in Nigeria. Miss Mobola Johnson was part of that committee. Pepu was part of that committee. Chief Emeka Wogu was Minister of Labor, was part of that committee. I mean, these are decent people. These are smart people, and very smart people. They were all members of that committee. That committee was a committee of 10. But I tell you what surprised me earlier. When they finished that work, government accepted less than 10% of the recommendations that the Oronsaye Commission put across to them. And this is what this is where I want us to pick up this discussion tonight. Do you understand? This is where I want us to pick up this this discussion tonight. Now, like we said at the beginning here, and for the benefit of our listeners, this is a country where we spend 85% as recurrent expenditure. Most of that money is spent paying salaries, okay? And it's clear from these recommendations that there's a lot of duplications. ICPC, EFCC, Code of Conduct Bureau. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So the question is, if somebody who is your number one civil servant can make this kind of recommendations, how is it possible that government has not taken these recommendations seriously?
Yeah, thank you, Kunle. When you were just talking, I was thinking about the problem. And I asked myself exactly, can we truly define what problem we want to solve? Is the problem that of work? Problem that of effectiveness to do work or efficiency?
Okay.
Until you truly define a problem, particularly a very complex one like Nigeria's problem, you will never be able to solve it. And when I mean Nigeria's problem, I don't mean the super complex Nigeria as a state problem. I see it as that of civil service. At the time, their definition was Nigerian civil service. That was the scope.
Yeah.
And where I thought they missed it and nobody can implement such reports is there's always a saying in management, before you chase efficiency, you chase effectiveness.
Okay. Okay.
So what's the essence of a civil service? What's the civil service defined for? What's it created to do? What work is the civil service? What's it supposed to do in a nation state?
It's supposed to run that nation. It's the machine that runs the nation, right?
It's the bureaucracy for a nation state.
Correct.
And then you say, okay, can you see me well? I have created a bureaucracy to run a nation state.
Okay.
What's the work there is to do? What's the work there is to do from a very high level to a low level? You need to truly conceptualize the work, envision it, then go and do it. Then before you begin to chase efficiency, you say, okay, this is the goal, this is the objective, this is the work to do. Now go do it, and I measure you doing it. How well are you doing the work? If that work meets the objective, then it's effective.
Okay.
Then I will now say, okay, I haven't achieved the first goal, which is to do this work to meet this standard.
Okay.
I now want to do it with the right number of people.
Exactly. So basically, what you're saying is that we need to do effective work, which is do the work correctly first. Only when we achieve effectiveness can we go to efficiency. This is what you're saying. Whereas it looks like the way we've approached this problem is that we're trying to tackle the efficiency first by saving costs and cutting people. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And I asked myself, let's take an example. Law enforcement, NDLEA. You say, oh, there's a law enforcement agency charged to go after people who breach narcotics, drugs, and every other thing. There is EFCC, to go after those who breach financial crimes. There is Interpol to go after those that do it outside. And there's the police service. Now you say they are similar, but isn't the question first that do you have a law to help you apprehend, first distinguish between offense, crime, misdemeanor, and the rest, break it down? Then do you have one enforcement body that just helps you first, maybe one, maybe 30, but you say this is enforcement, this is the rule book,
achieve enforcement first.
Best. If it will be, I want to achieve enforcement with 360 bodies, one per each local government, first achieve enforcement.
Okay, but Elliot, I hear you, and you know what you're saying to me is, I get it. I get what you're saying. Okay. But the truth, but I also see where they are coming from. Do you understand? Is it not a catch-22? If you're spending 85% of your recurrent expenditure, and you know that there's so much waste in these duplications, I mean, there's something to be said for that as well, isn't it?
Yes, there's a lot to be said for it. If you're spending 85% of your your revenue on running the bureaucracy,
correct,
and in your mind, you know the bureaucracy is not working because it's not effective.
Correct. It's bloated.
Why would you set a body to help you reduce costs? The first drastic step you do is you turn down the bureaucracy, shut it down, and see if you will die. If crimes goes up, if I shut down the police.
Okay.
Because there's no gradual way. You're ineffective, you're inefficient. You have one end of the pendulum.
Okay.
You take a shock treatment that I'm reducing everything by fiat and see if people will die. Then you begin to build back up.
Man, this is this is a tough explanation. I have to be honest with you. But let me tackle the question on effectiveness that you said. Because I also, like I said, I also see where you're coming from. Elliot, if you look back into the 70s, for example, we used to have what they call the super pump sex in Nigeria. I mean, you remember that. Ali Sinaida, people like Alaji, Olufalai, Omo Nobai Rodowa, you know, when they were palm sex, they were palm sex. They were palm sex who had more power than ministers or anything. These guys were called super palm sex then. Our civil service was very efficient. Everybody knew about our civil service that we had in the 70s. Today, we don't have, I don't know any palm sec in Nigeria today now. Do you understand? So in fact, I don't even know whether they call them palm secs anymore. I think they call them the DGs now, Director Generals. So it seems, and those DGs are now also political appointees. Whereas in the olden days, you grow, it was the ambition of every civil servant to grow to that level where you can become a palm sec. You know, that's the apogee of your career. So my question is that is it that by changing the civil service, by politicizing that civil service, do you understand? We rendered it ineffective, i.e., we're not training the people to get to that. There's no hierarchy. The hierarchy has been distorted and things like that. Is that what killed the effectiveness of our civil service? Because our civil service used to be very effective.
No, I don't think politicization killed it. I think we got politicization because the civil service became big, because it became a bureaucracy. Because it became a bureaucracy like you expect it to be. And we never thought about democracy running side by side with it. So politicization was an outcome, an undesired outcome, but it became an outcome. But I think the fundamental thing, the difference between what we have today and what we used to have, I'll call it a nation state forming, and I'll call it prioritization. You run a home, I run a home. And when I decide what my priorities are, if there are 6, I put special attention on those 6 things. If I decide to dilute that to 36, it's
then
the same. It's the
Hmm.
same me that would have to figure out how I put special attention. It's the same resource I have that I will spread that I used to spend on 6 that I will spend
Six.
on
Now you
30.
spend on 36. I see. I see.
As a nation, the moment we decided that everything was important, and in strategy, you learn that strategy is about trade-offs.
Hmm.
Strategy from corporate level is about agreeing on the things you go after. And I'm taught that there are just three things. Pick three things and go after them. Now, it's not strategy if you're not going to trade off something. If you're not going to suspend something, there must be an opportunity cost.
Cost. Okay. Hmm.
There is no and or in strategy. I'm not picking three and the other three and the other three and the other three. I
Hmm.
will pick three that are most important to me, to my development at this particular time.
Hmm.
And that's why it has a period of time, a time frame. I will go after them, achieve the goals, then I can reorder my priority within the other time frame. The last time as a nation we had a national development strategy was in those days, because the
Yeah.
first thing as
70s
a
and
nation,
yeah. Up to
uh,
1980. Yeah.
yeah, as a nation is you say, okay, this is our developmental phase. These are the most important things we'll prioritize as a nation state.
Hmm.
And that drives every other thing we do. Ministries, departments, and agencies. And MDAs are not just words of mouth. Ministries are bigger, departments are next, and agencies are at the bottom. It's a pyramidal system,
Correct.
right? You cannot have as much ministries as your agencies. But it all comes down from national priorities, national strategy, national development plan.
Hmm.
Those
Okay.
things.
I mean, Elliot, okay, I hear you and I agree with you, particularly. In fact, I was going to ask you that question on the MDAs anyway. So it's good that you've already gone into that, which is good. And but one point that you just made there now is that we cannot have the same number of departments as agencies. Yeah, you made
No,
that. Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you there. But one thing that I see in the Nigerian environment now is that there are agencies who are competing full time with the ministry.
no, it shouldn't be. It goes back to what I'm saying, that you cannot elevate an agency to a ministry. Take the United States, even the UK, M15 is not a ministry.
Hmm. Okay.
M15 is not a ministry.
It's
It's
not.
huge. It manages a huge budget. It's not a ministry. NHS is not a ministry.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, but
Okay?
okay. But look at that example. It's a good example. The NHS is not the Ministry of Health in the UK, but the NHS has more viability or visibility than the ministry itself, doesn't it?
Well, unfortunately, yes, and that's how it should be. CIA is an agency in the United States. It works for the Ministry of Justice.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, there are clear. There's a boundary between the CIA and FBI,
I
and there
know,
are
I know where
clear roles and
I know where you are
responsibilities.
going with this. I know where you're going with this. And let me help our listeners to get there very quickly. Because the example you're giving now is very apt. You know about the recent problem we're having between EFCC and the Minister of Justice.
Yep.
Do you understand? And these are the issues. I mean, and because the EFCC guy, whether he likes it or not, should normally report into the Ministry of Justice. And
Clean.
that's one of the recommendations from this Oronsaye report. Similarly, we cannot have an Atomic Energy Commission or an agency, but it's outside the Ministry of Power.
It
We have
shouldn't.
we have the Debt Management Office. It's sitting in the office of the VP outside the Finance Ministry. So now the problem is that these guys, because they have the ears of the president or the vice president or the senior people, they are bypassing their ministers, they are bypassing the DGs of those ministries, and therefore the work doesn't seem to be coordinated.
Yeah. So, and we need to go back, and that's why I say something. When you want to solve things, you ask yourself the nation state, the strategy, the ethos, and the structure that you've built to drive certain behavior and achieve your strategy. The framers of the Constitution never envisaged that the presidency is super powerful, but in presidency, you should not be building the agencies and departments on its own.
They've become too big, I tell you. Yeah.
You understand? Then secondly, the framers also never envisage. The only people who can stand aside a ministry are offices where you have to go to the Senate for approval. And you know what that means is this position stands on its own. It's independent. That's why you go through the Senate. You know, say for
I see what you're saying. I mean, let me buttress some of the points that you're making, Elliot. And I always like to keep simple examples. I remember when Alex Akinyele was Minister of Information in Nigeria under Babangida. Can you compare the amount of power or the authority that Alex Akinyele had as a Minister of Information to any Minister of Information that we have now? No, exactly. Because why? Because the presidency has two spokespersons who are speaking before the Minister of Information speaks.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And in fact, that may not be an aberration, right? But you know, the bigger thing was the agencies that were part of, from the NTA and the rest, that were very powerful organs of government.
Organs of those ministries, yeah.
They were organs of government through those ministries. You call them propaganda machines, but they were well oiled. And there was a single message from them, you know, started from Tony Momo, Akinyele, that they used to write later to my people. It was clear what the message would be.
Exactly.
Even though MAMSA was so powerful, but MAMSA was still part of that ministry.
Ministry of Youth and yes.
Everybody spoke the same language. You were sure that there was no dilution or confusion in message or message. Now that's the beauty of it. But you know, the initial question you asked was, why did the government who thought they wanted to do this, why didn't they see it through? I say that everything about government and leadership, the first leadership, I call it leadership behavior, is courage of conviction. As a leader, you need to first lead yourself before you lead others. You need to be special sure, you know, because there are no right or wrong decisions with leadership.
Yeah, I agree.
Leadership is about me being sure of where I stand, and I go sell my manifesto to people, and I go execute it in an anticipation or understanding that I may be successful. In most cases, I want to be successful, and I'm sure that I will be successful. Now, the other thing you see with when you set up that, the courage of conviction and the will to see it through are two things. The next one is the will to see it through. Because I never sold that as one of my manifesto, and I do not have an ideology, it becomes very difficult for me to make deep and transformational change or changes. Shrinking or turning the civil service to a lean, mean civil service is such a change, because the civil service is about provide 40% of the employment you see today in the country.
Yes, that's part of the issue. Yes, yeah.
And so anybody who does what you want, the real deal, will suffer job losses as a consequence of that. And he or she will suffer with political patronage.
Okay.
Consequence is very deep. Now, but if you sold it as a manifesto point, you spoke to it as an ideological issue, then it's easy to fix.
It. Okay. So Elliot, let me stop you there and let's try and recap for our listeners. Yeah. So the first point you made here is that maybe the way we've gone around this Oronsaye report is not the right way. Because in it, we try to look at the efficiency question rather than the effectiveness question. So this was the first thing that I've picked from what you have said to us, okay? Number two, you came back to the issues of the MDAs and how hierarchical those MDAs need to be. I.e., we cannot have an agency, no matter how powerful you think you are as an agency, you need to go through the constitutional process and report into a ministry, or at least into that organization structure, into that structure. Otherwise, what we have is we have chaos. Otherwise, we will have chaos. So I've picked that. Okay. Now, number three, you're mentioning now that we should also have an ideology. It should be a program, a strategy from day one. It shouldn't be something that we're doing haphazard. And that's the only way we'll be able to accomplish it. Number four, you said that we should try and prioritize a few things. We should not try and dabble into everything at once. So those are the four things I've picked so far from what you have said to us. Let me bring you to my next question, though. My next question is that I feel that sometimes, and I could be wrong here, but I feel that our civil service also does not attract the best people. I could be wrong. Do you understand? But I have a feeling that if we went to the universities, for example, and we wanted to take the best kids coming out of school, they're not going to be inclined to go to our civil service. Now, that is a major disadvantage because most of the countries that do well in life are the ones who attract the best people from their schools, from their societies to run their bureaucracy. So my question to you, why is it that in Nigeria, why can't our civil service attract the best people into that civil service? Is it a money issue? Is it that they are not even trying enough? What is it? Why is it that they cannot attract the best people?
So I like the way you framed your question, which is the why. You stated your observation, and now is why that observation. Correct. Now, what I will tell you with that is just take a step backwards and ask yourself differently. What motivates the best brain? What will motivate the best individual?
Okay.
I don't think money motivates anybody.
No, I don't think so. Serious people are not motivated by money. No.
It's a purpose.
Yeah, it's a purpose. Purposeful work.
So,
yeah.
So it's an environment thing. Have you created that environment to attract the best of minds?
Okay, so it's a good point. I agree with you. I read a book recently, and they were saying you're absolutely right that doing meaningful work, that's the way the guy called it. He said doing meaningful work is the number one thing that attracts people. It's not necessarily money or whatever or position. It's doing meaningful work. They have a sense that they are contributing. Do you understand? So I agree with you that maybe our ministries have not created that avenue. But I see that some people have also tried and they failed. Let me remind you. Do you remember in 2006, I think Kuponi was the NNPC MD at the time. And I remember we were working in one of the oil majors in Nigeria. And this guy sent people from NNPC and DPR, and they assigned them to each of the international oil companies in Nigeria. Do you remember? We had a guy called Danladi. He was with us at that time. So these guys were assigned. Do you understand? It was a program to get people out of NNPC and to assign them to international oil companies, to Shell, to Total, to Exxon, to Chevron, and then so that these people can build skills as if they were working in OICs. It's not that they don't have skills, they have their own skills, but build commercialization skills and then go back to their own organization and change it. And I remember that program fell apart the minute that man, his name is Kuponi or something like that. Yeah, the minute he left.
Yeah.
So my problem, the reason I'm giving this example is that even if somebody tries to create the environment, like that guy tried to create it now, it didn't seem to work.
So but Kunle, I will take you back. You're asking me, I'll take you back to your opening statement, meaningful work. Tie that to the very first thing why I said is effectiveness first. And effectiveness will be based on a vision. There's work to be done. I didn't say there is King just shared, I didn't say he shared, there is work to be done. And work, do you understand?
All right.
That work would dignify man.
It would dignify. Okay, I see. The Maslow's theory is the Maslow's hierarchy.
It's not just that I want to move files around. It's why am I moving files around? Now, when the NNPC guy came, it's trying, fundamentally, you need to first define what's the role of NNPC.
Correct.
What's the transformational role we want to serve? What's our work in nation building and as NNPC? Then I will have evangelists for that work. Then I will now start building capacity and competency.
To achieve that aim, okay?
And that will attract people. The people will get attracted because of the work.
I see. I get your point. Okay. Not said on that then. Okay. So basically what you're saying, anyway, that's another point to take away from that. So point number 5 is that the reason we're not attracting the best people to our civil service is because we're not giving them the right environment for meaningful work. Wow.
Yes, and I will ask you a simple question. If Kunle, all you have to do at your place of work is to have something to do for 30 minutes and you spend 9 hours there, what would you do with the remaining 8.5 hours?
I know. You just coast and yeah.
And if you are smart as you call yourself, what will you do after 2 years? Because you're not regenerating your skills, you're not building new skills, and you're very smart, and you only work for 30 minutes, what would you do after 2 years?
You will start looking for somewhere to put that skill, that smartness, and that's where the corruption starts. Yeah. Ah, man, this is not good. Okay, so thank you for that. Thank you for that. So I haven't identified this now. We've talked about this effectiveness issue. We've talked about the working environment, the fact that we're not putting their skills to the best of things in some cases. How can we fix that problem? Now, how can we fix it, Elliot? Can it be fixed? Because the more I listen to some of you, the panelists, I'm actually afraid that can we fix this issue?
So when things are this way, right? You say the solution is political. I do not believe that the solution is anything but political. The first thing is it's political because the nation, the people that make the nation will first decide what they want by casting their votes. People need to sell to them options. These are the optionalities, A, B, C. This is what A means. This is what B means. This is what C means. As you cast your vote.
But Elliot, let me stop you there, though. Do you think, but this is my worry, though. Do you understand that for us to have a proper democracy, there has to be a certain level of education, a certain level of information. It's not just to read book and have BSc. Do you understand? You need to have education in terms of, I'm not talking literacy, I'm talking education. You need to be informed. And my worry is that maybe we have not achieved that level yet as a country. We have
but it's a two-way thing.
It's even worse.
Yeah, we've not. The enlightenment required to make those decisions doesn't reside with the commoners.
Just yet.
Just yet. There's a few who understand. And secondly, the sincerity required to help the people get that enlightenment doesn't also belong to the political class. They have not seen themselves as having contrasting ideas as to, we may be sure of what we want as El Dorado, but the path to El Dorado
we don't know,
And I need to be bold enough to say, I do not agree that your path will take us there quicker. And this is the path. So your question is about what path will take us to El Dorado. There are a number of paths out there. But there is no way a path will be traveled without somebody coming to tell the people, because it's expensive emotionally and politically. You can decides to commercialize half the civil service?
Thank you, sir. This is one question I was going to put to you, actually. I remember I read the book Margaret Thatcher, the Downing Street Years, Downing Street Years by Margaret Thatcher. And Thatcher did something like this in the 80s, like you remember. Thatcher was one of the people that started a lot of these MDAs, these agencies. She went a lot for agencies because she saw that the bureaucracy was not responding enough. The bureaucracy has become what it is. It's a bureaucracy. And he has a way of moving slowly. It will get there, but it moves rather slowly because it's a bureaucracy. And for her to be able to achieve some of the things that she achieved in the time, she needed to go to an agency. So that agency, those agencies, some of them were commercialized, like you rightly said. I remember, I don't know if you remember the years when Marwa was governor of Lagos. He didn't do a lot of the roads in Lagos with the Ministry of Works. He set up an agency that did roads. Do you remember? Those guys used to work all night. They used to work all night.
All night.
And they fixed the road. They fixed the road. The roads have been bad for years. They came around and they fixed them. So
we called it public works.
We can do.
We called it Public Works Department, PWD. You can go commercialize everything, but there's impact. The moment you commercialize them, you're saying, go get me revenue, make sure your revenue generating. So whatever you get as income, inflows must be bigger than your expense, right? You will have a director general that has all the authorities. You can have big MDAs, but it's all commercial driven. The other extreme is you do what we do today, which is akin to the Chinese doctrine, where the MDAs are big.
National champions, yes.
They are national champions. They do what they do. They are very slow, but they have an ideology.
And they get the job done, ultimately, yes.
And they are a political party.
Correct.
And they will be in government for 60 years. So you will swing from both.
Yeah.
But there's no way you merge both.
I see. Okay, but Elliot, let me ask you another question there, because you just made a point now that I've also said is a problem that we have not looked at yet. Do you understand? I know that, so you mentioned exactly when you were answering the last question, you talked about empowering that DG, a director general, to be able to take decision. Do you understand? Yeah? Okay. I know that does not really exist in a lot of places in Nigeria. And people tell me, and when I have these discussions with people, why is it that we cannot allow people to be in a place and let them take the decisions to get the job done? People tell me, oh, it's corruption. If you give them the money, they will steal the money. Do you understand? But let me give you a quick example. I remember I was having a discussion with someone once, and he was telling me that the approval limit for the MD of NMPC is $5 million or something like that. Yeah. Now, $5 million to the guy on the street sounds like a lot of money. Do you understand? But between I who and people who work in oil and gas industry, they know that $5 million cannot buy him one compressor. You understand? Yep. He cannot even buy him, maybe he cannot buy him a major pump. Do you understand? He cannot buy you a fire water pump. So bottom line, you have people who are sitting at the very top of big organizations, but they cannot actually take any meaningful decision because their drag is too low.
Yeah, but drag is a delegation of authority. If you go to MDAs, the man who has the final authority is the president, right?
Okay.
Now, if you decide that you want to delegate authority, you remember that the they are drag for different things.
Okay.
The drag for procurement is going to be different for drag for entertainment spend, for instance.
Correct.
So
now, if you just for the benefit of our listeners, a DOAG is what they call a delegation of authority. Yeah?
Guy.
Okay,
yeah. So that says if you want to buy something, you can procure something up to 100 million. But if
Okay.
you want to buy, you want to spend for entertainment and guests, you cannot do it. You cannot spend beyond 100,000.
Correct.
Now, somebody has looked at depending on what needs to be done, and the reason you put it is because there's a board, right? The board has different other people, and the board is over the executive
Over the
chairman or
exec.
the
Correct. Correct.
okay. Now the other thing, the thing I see most, right, is you cannot be asking for responsibility without accountability. Is principle 101 in leadership.
Fair point. That's a fair point. Okay.
You
Clear.
cannot say, oh, the DGs are not exercising responsibility when the DG himself has never done a budget.
And he has never given account of how he spent last year's budget.
Last year's budget, he's never even prepared a zero budget in his life. And his budget is all expense, no revenue.
No revenue.
One and no, and there's no KPI to measure him against his performance. Right. So that man is just a DG for mouth. Based on name, he just takes money. He doesn't even go home at the end of the week to say, what have I achieved this week? It goes back to the other thing, the first thing, effectiveness. Why do I have a ministry? Why do I have this department? What are the KPIs for these people? If it's law enforcement, if crime is going up, does law enforcement knows that they failed if my crime rate is going
high? Does our power ministry know that that they are failing if our power, we're not getting less than 4 hours of light every day?
Every day. So that's the fundamental thing. You need to first address that before you now say, okay, the other things that come with it.
But Elliot, tell me though, are you saying, because, okay, I agree with what you're saying, right? But my question is, but these are smart people. Do you understand? Some of these people we're talking about are very smart people. When I talked about the committee that looked at the Oronsaye report, I was giving names like Emeka Wogo. I was giving names like Mobola Johnson. I mean, these are smart people. You understand?
Correct.
So these are not just anybody's, right? So we have Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala in government. We had Segun Agaga. He came from Goldman Sachs. We had Adesina Akinwumi in government. Nasir El-Rufai in government. We have Kayode Fayemi in government. Fashola. We have Amechi. These are smart guys. They're not just off the street people. So they must know this thing. So what is stopping us from executing it? What?
Well, I call it political will, right? Smartness is very. Hello.
I'm with you.
Yeah. I have no doubt that a lot of these people, everybody you've called, they're smarter than me talking.
Yeah, they're smarter than us. Right? They're smarter than us.
Sure. But when you want to make a decision, right, that's going to concern the entire country, right? You need buy-in, decision making to be successful. You don't want to make a decision for the sake of decision. You want to make a decision to be successful and sustainable, right? So you need buy-in of all stakeholders. Discussing this fundamentally goes to the heart. You remember when we started talking, you talk about what is restructuring. And I said restructuring is around the evolution of powers. The federal government, as you have today, has too much responsibility.
Yeah, I see.
They need to be able to devolve it. And once you devolve those responsibilities to the lower tiers of government, it's natural, it just follows.
Okay, I see. Elliot, okay, so, but okay, I'm about to wrap up now because I'm conscious of the time. Now, please give me some good news. Tell me that we can fix this. Is it possible? It's been done before. Can we fix it? Is it possible?
Yeah, we can. What I tell people to go always look at, right? They say Singapore. Singapore was only about that state that moved from third world to first world. And
Correct.
they've done it in this century. Now, people do not understand how poor Singapore was. They were chased out of
Oh,
Malaysia
Malaysia,
by the
exactly.
Malays,
Yes,
by the
yes,
Malays.
yes.
And the truth about it, when they had a national identity, they had a national rebirth. Fundamentally, we cannot solve the problem high up there. It's I say it's that problems are problems, but if you look at the root cause, it's family. And the families begin to solve their problem, the
I
society
see.
problem
The
is
society
sorted.
problem will solve. So basically, we shouldn't solve it from up down. We should solve it from down up.
We should look at ourselves in our eyes, in our face, and tell ourselves the honest truth. That we are too smart. We have smart Nigerians. You're running this program. You're talking to me where we have talk shop everywhere. The only thing that is missing is the action to translate those talks to something else. We can solve this, but it requires leadership and it requires followership. The followership needs to be more aware than the leadership and ensure that the leadership serves the cause of the followership. What we have today is a followership that is not aware and a leadership that is serving the cause of an uneducated, unaware followership. We're not making progress.
We're not making progress.
The followership need to retrace their step, debate their issues, make up their mind that they want progress and define progress in a positive light. These things are solvable.
Man, I thank you so much for your time. It's been, the time flew by actually, as we went through that. But I want to thank you for your time. It's been fantastic. In another week or two, we'll be talking about the petroleum industry bill, the PIB. I like to invite our listeners to join that. Elliot, hopefully you can join me for that. I'm hoping to put together a panel of interesting people from the oil and gas industry. Let's discuss that bill. At least let's say to our people what's on that bill and how it can benefit our country. Again, I want to thank you for the time tonight, and I'll speak with you soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.